Okay, let's unpack this. You've brought us some source material that really dives deep into these allegations
Hmm.
by Cassie Ventura against Sean Diddy Combs. It's one of those topics that kind of forces you to look at the difference, right, between that glossy public image and entertainment
Yeah, the shine.
and the really serious, sometimes frankly disturbing stuff alleged behind the scenes.
Exactly. And this material, it gives a pretty close look at a situation that, it went from headlines very quickly to being part of a much larger conversation.
About power, yeah. And relationships, accountability.
All of that.
So our goal today really is to try and cut through some of the noise for you, the learner. We want to pull out the key insights.
Right.
We'll look at the alleged timeline, the claims themselves as the sources present them, and, what this whole story might tell us, according to this material, about those bigger themes. Celebrity, alleged abuse, the dynamics in these kinds of powerful relationships.
And what's really striking, right off the bat in these sources, is the contrast they draw. They start by describing the relationship. Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura.
Yeah.
Mid-2000s it began.
Right, and how it looked from the outside.
Yeah, how it was often portrayed, the public view.
Like that power couple image they sometimes had, seen everywhere together, working together.
Collaborations,
Yeah.
events. There was this projected image, the sources say, of an unbreakable bond.
A very specific, kind of glamorous picture.
Precisely. But then the material just pivots sharply. It goes straight to Cassie's allegations in her lawsuit.
And basically says the reality was different.
Yeah, stating the reality of their relationship was far from the glamorous image. That's the quote used.
And the core allegation, as the material lays it out, it's incredibly serious.
It is. The central claim detailed is Cassie asserting she endured years of emotional and physical abuse all through their relationship.
Wow.
And that's the fundamental gap the sources are highlighting. Public perception versus the alleged private experience.
Okay, so let's dig into those specifics a bit more. The claims as they're presented in the sources. What kind of pattern, what alleged pattern of behavior is described?
Well, the material goes into what Cassie alleges was this pervasive pattern of manipulation.
Manipulation. How so?
The claim is that Diddy exerted control over her life.
Hmm.
And the sources really emphasize this wasn't just like minor stuff.
No.
No, it allegedly went into major areas. Her career choices, it says, even her personal relationships.
That level of alleged control, that really suggests a significant power imbalance, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the sources also bring up specific alleged instances of physical violence.
Okay.
Yes. They recount something described as a harrowing experience, an alleged attack by Diddy in a hotel room.
And the description of her feeling?
The account portrays it as leaving her feeling trapped and powerless. It's the language used.
Right.
And importantly, the sources connect these really specific, difficult claims directly to those broader conversations.
About domestic violence.
Yes, about domestic violence, and also the huge challenges faced by those in abusive relationships. It sort of underlines how these allegations, they resonate way beyond just one couple's story.
Okay, so staying with the allegations for a moment, how do the sources then link this to the bigger picture stuff? Power, fame, accountability.
Right. If we sort of zoom out, the sources really highlight that critical issue. Power dynamics in relationships.
Especially when fame is involved.
Exactly. Magnifying the potential for imbalance when one partner holds significant fame and influence. It just amplifies everything.
And there's a point made about celebrity culture itself, isn't there? How that plays a role.
Absolutely. The sources definitely explore that angle, how celebrity culture can sometimes shield individuals from accountability.
Shield them? How?
Well, the argument presented is that this culture, with its layers of public image, PR, resources, influence, it can potentially allow abusive behavior to go unchecked.
I'd say.
So the material really frames this whole situation not just as, a private dispute between two people.
No, it's bigger.
Yeah, it's reflecting a larger societal issue, specifically regarding the treatment of women and the normalization of abusive behavior in relationships. It really pushes you to consider the systemic things possibly at play.
It feels like this conversation is happening within a specific cultural moment, too. The sources mention things like the hashtag #MeToo movement.
They do, yeah. They point out how movements like hashtag #MeToo were really crucial. They brought attention to the importance of speaking out against abuse.
And accountability for powerful people.
Exactly, holding powerful individuals accountable. And the material sort of positions Cassie's decision to come forward within that context.
As a courageous step.
That's the phrasing used, yeah.
That's
A courageous step. One that could potentially inspire others to share their stories.
Fostering more support.
Right, contributing to a broader culture of empowerment and support for survivors. That's the connection being made.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, away from the legal side. What did the sources say about how the public reacted? Because this was, and is, highly visible.
Very visible. And the sources describe that reaction as notably mixed, very divided.
How so?
Well, on one side, you have significant shock and disappointment, from fans, from people who knew that public image.
Okay.
But then there are also others who, as the sources note, are quick to defend Diddy.
Defend him based on?
Often citing his significant contributions to music and culture. His legacy, essentially.
That division itself seems really telling about how we maybe process news involving famous people.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? The sources see this division as highlighting the sheer complexities of celebrity worship.
Right.
It shows the difficulty, the source says, in reconciling an artist's public persona with their private actions. Or, their alleged private actions in this case.
And social media played a role.
Oh, absolutely. The material points out how social media just became this battleground for opinions, everyone weighing in. And it emphasizes that the conversation this whole thing sparks, it really goes beyond just the individuals involved. To addressing the societal norms, the sources argue, that allows such behavior to persist, and ultimately the need for change.
So pulling back now from our deep dive into the sources you shared, what really stands out is that stark alleged contrast.
The gap.
Yeah, between that carefully built public image, the fame, the success, and then the incredibly difficult alleged realities described in Cassie's claims.
And the sources are very clear in connecting this specific story to those larger ongoing discussions we've touched on.
Power dynamics.
Power dynamics, vulnerability, and the huge challenges involved in addressing allegations of abuse.
Especially under the spotlight.
Especially when it unfolds under the intense glare of celebrity.
And understanding these dynamics, as they're laid out in this material we've discussed, it really does give you, the listener, a much more informed perspective.
For sure.
Not just on this specific situation, maybe, but on the wider complexities whenever these kinds of stories surface.
Which kind of brings us to a final thought, something for you to carry with you from this deep dive based on the material.
And given all these complexities of fame we've talked about, the alleged power dynamics described, and those varied public reactions the sources noted, what does this whole exploration suggest about how we as a society actually process and grapple with these issues? Issues of alleged abuse and accountability, especially when they involve figures who are so well known. What questions does that raise for you?